Hi there, I'm Skaji, I'm a practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd. I'm glad you're here. Our vocabulary word this week is Qabalah. Well, that's actually more than one word. And by way of explanation, I'm going to share a bit from the Chicken Qabalah of Rabbi Lamed ben Clifford by Milo DuQuette. Now, I've referenced this work before, and I'm sure I will again. It's a great book on Qabalah for a non-Qabalist like me. My copy was gifted to me by my wonderful friend. Thank you, Noel. From the introduction, for hundreds of years, a small but zealous number of Orthodox Jewish men have preserved a complex and highly structured tradition of study and meditation. Based partly upon an intense analysis of the Hebrew scriptures and Talmudic texts, and partly upon the writings of several influential thinkers of the medieval and Renaissance periods. These pious and dedicated Qabbalists absorbed themselves passionately in a perpetual quest for the revealed Word of God. Understandably, Orthodox Qabbalists do not have much respect for Qabbalists and Qabbalists, and from their points of view, this snobbery is well justified. Nevertheless, it cannot be denied that great spiritual benefit can be derived from Kabbalistic thought and exercise, even if the student chooses not to embrace the Hebrew religion. By general convention, the different spellings refer to different philosophical and practical approaches. Qabalah is the Jewish Orthodox approach. Qabalah is the Christian flavor, and Qabalah is the Western esoteric or ceremonial flavor favored by such folks as the Order of the Golden Dawn. But just as there are multiple spellings, there isn't a single book called Qabalah. The Qabalah is in truth a collection of lots of writings such as the Zohar, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Bahir, and many, many more. So we have Qabbalists, Qabalah, Qabalut, Qabalim. Anyway, the Qabalah encompasses lots of writings under a single umbrella, if not in a single book. The word or words translate as received tradition. The Qabalah, as my simple mind sees it, is a model of the universe which explains within that model how the universe works, where it came from, and where we naked apes fit into all of it. During the French occult revival of the 19th century, several occultists began to apply Kabbalistic philosophy to the tarot, and that's how we get to the cards from the Qabalah. This week's card is the King of Wands and was suggested by Aiden. Thanks, Aiden. When looking at the minor arcana cards, there are a few bits to consider. Those would be the suit, the number, and of course the imagery, but not necessarily in that order. In this case, we're working with one of the court cards, so number isn't directly an issue. We'll look at the court cards more in a bit. Wands are traditionally associated with the classical element of fire. The way I see this element is, if I have to use just one word, it's passion. Many times when that word is used, it's used to refer to certain physical pursuits. And that is indeed one of the associations of fire, but it isn't all there is to it. To my mind, fire is also associated with will, creativity, illumination, and power. In short, wands represent those aspects of life which fire us up. And why is the wand basically a big stick associated with fire? That very element that can burn it all up. I know, if you get a fire hot enough, you can burn anything up, but don't be obtuse. I did a little digging and then got distracted by all the stuff on my desk, so I don't have any deep or meaningful quotes or references for this. But let's think about it for a moment. Fire is associated with things that light us up, with will, with creativity. Fire is also a kind of a pushy element. It's projective. In earlier ways of looking at fire, it was considered to be a masculine element. Well, okay, so was air, but give me a moment. Look at the Ace of Wands from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Here we have our proverbial big stick, and it seems to be greenwood, what with all the leaves and all. Fire, in its creativity association, can be seen as generative in all kinds of ways. Not to put too fine a point on it, that's what the swords are for. The wands represent, in a metaphorical sense, the male side of the procreative equation. I'm going to take a side road here for a second to address the elephant in the room. You can tell, I think, that I'm not a young man. Haven't been for a while. And it's been said that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's just crazy talk. I learn new stuff all the time. And sometimes I even remember it. And when it comes to how people choose to identify themselves, I know I've been learning a lot over the past few years. And I think it's all just wonderful. I love it when I see my friends being their true selves, no matter how that presents for them. I don't know all the terms for ways people choose to identify themselves. I just let them tell me what words they want me to use, and I do my dead level best to use them. Me, I'm a rather vanilla hetero dude. But I have had parts of myself that I've hidden in general for most of my life, specifically my spirituality. And I kept it hidden out of fear. Now, I do live in the southeastern United States, after all. Great food, but we do need to work on being more understanding of others. Bless our hearts. Now, I'm not sharing this to say that any struggles I may have experienced in any way equal anyone else's. Each person's struggles are theirs, and their experiences of those struggles are perfectly valid. What I am saying is this, that I am so very, very proud, and a little jealous if I'm being honest. But I'm so very proud of my trans, non-binary, and otherwise gender-fluid friends. I am encouraged by, well, their courage. And I said all that to say this. When I refer to gender in the tarot, I am using it as a metaphor. Just that. There are lots of ways the energies of the universe express themselves, and part of our path is understanding just how those energies express themselves within and through us. To help this old dog learn some new tricks, I've been working my way through Queering the Tarot by Cassandra Snow. And if you're an old dog too, I highly recommend this book. They also have another book that I haven't gotten yet called Queering Your Craft. I've dropped a link or two to the author in the description. Now let's get back to the King of Wands. The court cards seem to be particularly troublesome for some folks. I get it. The court cards are those cards in the deck which are most like people, all chock full of inconsistencies and contradictions. If you want to take a deep dive into the court cards, check out Understanding the Tarot Court by Mary K. Greer and Tom Little. In that book, the authors really get into all the different ways to view the court cards, societally, psychologically, and they really get into it. Since I tend to be more elemental, like the elements, in my focus, I see the court cards as extensions of the energies of their suit. If the pips, that's the aces and numbered cards, are the university of the elements, then the court cards are grad school. Each court card, king, queen, knight, page, and your deck may rename the court, and that's okay. But I'll use the traditional names here. Each court card is associated with an element in addition to the element of its suit. This is a Kabbalistic concept and is really the only place I use the Qabalah a lot in the tarot, but naturally I do it in my own way. There's a great tarot chapter in the Chicken Qabalah which discusses this concept in depth. Well, kinda. In this book, the kings are associated with fire, queens with water, the knights or princes with air, and the pages or princesses with earth. Now, I've always felt that it worked a little better for me like this. Kings with earth, queens with water, knights with air, and pages with fire. Whichever way you choose to do it, and you don't have to do this at all, but whichever way you choose to do it, it's just fine if it helps you get better readings. Think about it like this, if you will. What is the watery part of air? How does a thought feel? What is the earthy part of fire? What is the strength of passion, of will? The longer you sit with these ideas, the more sense it'll make, and I promise you that all the effort is well worth it. For our King of Wands, I'm going to talk about how I see the kings. Just remember that there are other ways to do this as well. Here we have the earth of fire, the strength of will, which to me can be summed up in one word: power. Power as a concept is neutral, just like a hammer is neutral. We can use power, the strength of our will, to build up or to tear down. In this way, power is a tool. It's a hammer. Our King of Wands carries the practicality and stability of earth to the drive, energy, and creativity of fire. The King of Wands isn't a raging bonfire. He isn't a forest fire. He is a forge. He's the hearth fire. He's the laser beam. He's energy focused and enduring. Here in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we see our fiery king seated on a throne decorated with lions and lizards, and he's even got himself a little lizard buddy hanging out nearby. We can remember that lions are Leo in astrology, and that's a fire sign, but what's with the lizards? Well, they're not lizards. They're salamanders. And they are, in occult symbolism at least, creatures of fire. Now, this counterintuitive association was first recorded by the Romans and might have its origin in the habit of hibernating salamanders to snuggle up inside rotting wood. It's thought that when folk would bring their firewood in, the rudely awakened amphibians would exit the wood seemingly right out of the flames. I've put a link to an interesting article in the description. You see that platform on the throne there? It's kind of a squarish shape. In some schools of thought regarding sacred geometry, squares are associated with the concepts of stability, security, and the material world. Very earthy kinds of things. You'll also find a square supporting the king's throne on the King of Cups, and although it isn't visible on the pence and swords cards, based on context, I would infer the square there as well. Also in this card, we can see that the king isn't facing the viewer, but he's turned slightly away, and he has his head turned even further to the right. And I can imagine that he's turning his head from side to side, keeping his eyes out for trouble. He's ready for action. And the way he's holding the wand seems to imply action as well. He doesn't have it resting against anything. Instead, he's holding it upright, and that just looks more active to me. Try this sometimes. Get yourself a broom or a mop or a staff and try sitting in a chair holding the handle in a similar way and see how that feels. I will occasionally try to mimic the poses that I find in cards to get a better feel for what's going on. And there are decks that incorporate poses used in various spiritual traditions. But I'm not as bendy as I used to be, so I can't try mimicking as many cards as I once could. Gary loaned me his deck for this card. Here in Barbara Moore's Wizard's Tarot, our King of Wands seems to be a younger fellow with a very stylish haircut. I think this meshes well with the energy and vitality of fire. I know that I sure had a lot more energy when I was younger. You might be wondering why this king has himself two sticks. Well, I did too. All the kings in this deck carry a wizard's staff in one form or another, in addition to the representation of their suit. So the King of Wands has himself two sticks. The indicators of this suit, the wand aside, are a bit less obvious than in the Rider-Waite-Smith card. We have the red cloak. Red is frequently associated with the energy of fire. And the roses are traditionally associated with the water element. However, red roses are frequently associated with passionate love. And passionate is definitely a fire thing. And in the background, we see a desert. And I know I think of heat when I think of deserts. But it's a dry heat. In the Mucha deck, we have the lion and the salamander we saw in the Rider-Waite-Smith. But here, the king is standing. And this gives the king a more active feel. And I can imagine he was just seated, but stood to take action. In the background, we can see an active volcano. And maybe the volcano itself is an expression of the king's will. The king and the land are one, as it is said in the movie Excalibur. But I do wonder one thing, though. What's with the house slippers? I know others might wear their house slippers out of the house. I don't. Maybe the king of wands here is like me. We can know he's at home in his element, in his place of power, when he's wearing his house slippers. Now, this might seem a silly take, what with the footwear, but sometimes that weird stuff that comes out is actually relevant. I was participating in a fun tarot event about 10 years ago, give or take. A 10 of pence came out in the reading for my partner, and for some reason, an aspect of the card stood out to me and made me think of a broom handle. And the scene in the card with the little kid left me with the impression of the granddaddy making the kid a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I felt like this was quite a silly thing to think, but I said it anyway. And my reading partner commented that they were getting her grandmother's house ready to sell, and that she remembered her grandmother making her peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That revelation tied the rest of the reading together in a nice little package. What seems silly to us as a reader might be just the thing the seeker needs to hear. This card is from the Supernatural Tarot, a deck based on the TV show. My son loaned his deck to me for this. We enjoy watching the show together. I refer to decks like this as novelty decks. Now, that's not to minimize their potential value as a tool. They just tend to be less useful without a thorough knowledge of whatever media they're based on. That being said, I'm going to take a look at this card as though I didn't know anything about that TV show and see where that takes us. In this deck, bones are wands, and that femur in the upper right corner is kind of wand-like. We see here a writer clacking away at his typewriter. Now, a typewriter is an ancient word processor, printer, combo unit without autocorrect or even spell checker. He has a look on his face which strikes me as rather, well, he looks a bit crazed to me, and I get that. After I've been working on something for a while, I tend to get a little loopy too. But I don't think I might look like I want to burn down a building. He's wearing a formal writing jacket. He takes his work very seriously. And he has his books and papers all neatly arranged. No creative chaos for this guy. And the odd symbols and glyphs on the wall behind him hint at ancient writings and inspiration through time. Inspiration. Spirit coming in. Seems like a fire thing to me. As a person who also writes, if not well, then at least often, I like to pretend that I'm in charge of the work, that I know where things are heading. That's the illusion of it all, isn't it? The fires of creativity easily get out of control, and then we're left trying to contain the fire instead of using it. In the King of Wands, we can see the interplay of fire with the energy of earth, at least the way I look at it. Your mileage may vary. Here we have a ruler ready for action. His energy is steady, contained. The King of Wands puts his creativity to work, and he's not at all a passive figure. And there we have the King of Wands. Thanks for the suggestion, Maiden. And thank you for spending your time with me today. If you've enjoyed that, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Skaji, safe journey. based partly upon an intense analysis of the Hebrew scriptures and the Talmudic texts. Talmudic. Fire in its creativity. Fire in its creativity. Creativity